Okay, a couple things to discuss here about the film and from the story, and I kind of want to address some of the questions that I asked and give an explanation. Hopefully, that will help you in the future and these next stories to kind of know what I'm looking for. Now, a lot of these questions I ask you are opinion questions, so I'm not necessarily marking you wrong if your opinion is different than mine or other people. It really is your opinion on a lot of these. Now, some I ask more directly, but I want you to expound on that. That's the main thing I grade you on, is that you talk about why you think it is. I've wrote a few of you guys just to remind you, hey, put a little explanation to get the full point, so I know what you're thinking, why you think yes or no. It's got to go beyond that. One thing I want to address at the beginning is the main difference of this film and the story that you read. Obviously, it being a short story, they didn't go deep into the characters. But one of the main differences, and I addressed this several ways in some of the questions, was, should there be other characters? Why do you think, what would draw you more into the main story? That kind of thing. What the main difference, and one of the things, and I think another question I asked was, making this into a film and you were the director, what challenges would you face? Well, the main challenge is, in a story that you're reading, you can read Jeff, the narrator's thoughts. He talks about his thought, I'm thinking this, I'm suspecting this. In a film, you can't necessarily have that. Now, some films do have a narrator talking, or the main character, a voiceover, but it's rare. And with that too, you are kind of limiting, you're making it to where it's almost a speech that you're listening to, not necessarily thoughts in the moment. So in the film, they add characters to have that conversation of his, what he's watching, why he suspects, what he thinks. Those conversations are happening in dialogue, natural dialogue, and it makes it to where you're just kind of watching a story and not hearing a narrator. So that was one of the main differences. They have characters that Jeff talks to about his suspicions. One of the main difference characters is there's a love interest there, Grace Kelly's role, and she is, now her character she's a model. She wears like $1,000 gowns, and we're going to get into him in a second as far as his character, but he doesn't see a long-lasting relationship with her because he feels like they're from two different worlds. Well, that begins to change throughout the film. He begins to see, she gets into the story, she gets adventurous, and he begins to see things that he never saw in her before. So that's a big part of the story of the film that's not anywhere in the literature. So that is one way he can talk. Another character they add that's kind of big, her name is, I believe, Thelma Ritter. She is the kind of nurse that comes to take care of him a few hours a day. Now, in the story, he's got a house guy, Sam, that comes, but this is a more developed character that he talks to quite a bit. And she has suspicions about Jeff, why are you watching these people? And so they have those conversations. So that is part of it. Now, one thing the film does right away, because I asked you about, do you think it's right of Jeff to be staring and spying on his neighbors? And a lot of you guys put really good answers where maybe he's suspicious, Jeff himself. And the story kind of leaves that. Could be, maybe there's something that happened to him, kind of the deal. But in the film, they really quickly, right away, make it to where Jeff has you don't have any suspicions about Jeff. Because they right away explain why he's stuck in this room. His character is, he's a reporter, kind of a photographer for news stories, that he goes out and gets stories and takes photos. And he's had an accident. In fact, one of the stories was he was taking a picture of a wreck of a car race, and that wrecks into him and he broke his leg. So he is stuck in that place. So he has nowhere else to go. And of course, this is before everybody had TVs in their house, so he just really was stuck in this house with nothing to do. They also kind of, making him a reporter and a photographer kind of gives him an excuse of why he's interested in anything that happens that's story or newsworthy. He also has the equipment like a camera lens, binocular, you know, those things where he goes out and searches stories. So he has all this equipment. And then the last thing they kind of do to make it to where he had to kind of be there in front of his window is the very first shot of the movie, besides seeing the apartment complex, is they show a thermometer and it's really hot. And so everybody has their windows open. And so, you know, there was no air conditioner that day. So everything, you know, everybody had their windows open. Everything was out in the open. And people were outside kind of sun tanning or leaving their windows open or sleeping outside. And so all those things kind of have a purpose. So you never really, you know, suspect Jeff of anything. You really have plenty of reasons to know why he is doing this. Now, I feel like, now this is my opinion, but Jimmy Stewart, he was an actor that's kind of known as, you know, Hitchcock would like to use actors and actresses the same. He liked to use, you know, once he had an actor and actress that he felt like portrayed what he wanted, he would use them over and over. And Jimmy Stewart was kind of your everyday man. Like he could be any role and you kind of bought into it and you kind of put yourself in that position. So he, you know, that was another reason why you just didn't really, you just saw yourself in that position. Well, I'm stuck here, I have nothing else to do, I'm going to just start watching my neighbors. And then he begins to see things, especially what happens with the suspect, that he really is like, what's going on, I want to know what's happening. So you never really, you know, question that. So the film kind of erases that, kind of does away with that, and it adds these characters. He adds a few more as far as those in the apartment complex, because he develops those stories more. He has like he has the newlywed couple. He has a lady that he watches that's kind of lonely. A piano guy that's writing music and gets stuck on music, and I know what that's like. You're just, you know, you play so much, and then you're like, I just can't get any better. And so, you know, just a lot of those different stories. Now, the dancer, I told you about the couple that sleeps outside and what Hitchcock did to make them fight over getting the bed inside. The dancer, she's supposed to be an aspiring dancer. She wants these roles. She wants to be famous. That's pretty much all you know about her. But she was going to take, in real life, she was going to take dancing lessons. And Hitchcock told her absolutely not. He didn't want her to be good. So she had to come up with her own. He told her, just dance, you know, what you think. And so she came up with these moves that she thought were dance moves, and you could clearly see she wasn't that good. In fact, one point she's like eating a chicken leg and she starts dancing with it, and it's pretty comedic. So that was another thing he would do behind the scenes to make the story look like it did on the screen. So I felt like he got actors, and we're going to see a scene here where they act with their emotions and their faces. And of course, with all that's going on, you know, they talk about a lot more than they do in the story, but they also have to still react with their faces. And they have to, you know, if they see something, you know, you got to be able to see, because there's times that Jeff is still alone in his apartment and he sees things and he just totally reacts with his facial expression. One question that I did ask that I took some points off because it was specific. The video I shot earlier, and I'll do this from time to time. I'll ask specific questions from the videos, make sure you kind of get what I'm saying, what I'm going through, and what I'm teaching. I asked which actor and actress did I feel like were two that steal the scene. Now, I talked a lot about different actors and actresses, but when I specifically talked about stealing a scene, I brought up James Dean, who is not in this film, and you know, I say he was a method actor, and whenever he was on the screen, he just stole the show. And the other one I mentioned was Audrey Hepburn at that point, the actress that did that you just end up watching her. So some got that. I wanted to just say, now if I mess up your name, I'm really sorry. A lot of students, now that we've been for almost a full year online, I've not met a lot of my students now. You know, I have some that I still have from when I was on campus. So usually if I meet you and can get your name down and get it correct. So I apologize in advance if I mess up your name, which I know I will. But these are the ones that got the James Dean and Audrey Hepburn. Brittany Kadar, Flora Botella, Ashley Jefferson, Catherine Lewis, Mark Scroggins, Mary Shepley, Ruthie Edwards, Stacy Caraballo, and Stacy Chitwood. So Good job on that. Everybody's doing a good job pretty much of turning in your opinions and your thoughts, and I'm enjoying those. So good job, everybody. Way to keep, answering those questions, staying on top of that. The scene I want to show here, so really in the film and in the book, they keep you guessing. That was the whole purpose. They want you to go back and forth, and some of you guys did change your mind throughout, some didn't. Some, I'm sure, even though maybe your mind didn't completely change, you had some moments where you're like, well, maybe I am thinking wrong. Well, this is that moment where they find out pretty much the detective is looking, and that's one last thing about the question is they don't, in the film, they don't go into the suspect's house. I feel like, and I want you to explore that out, and some of you guys even put that it would have been illegal, and in that case, that's where I tend to agree. And I feel like in the film, they really tried to put all the suspicion on Jeff and Grace Kelly, her role, Lisa, as far as they're the suspect one, or they're the ones that are suspecting what's going on. The detective pretty well follows the book, and even though he believes Jeff, he's his friend, and he wants to explore that, they keep him pretty well where he's going to do things by the book, because that would have opened a whole nother part of the story. Like if they're willing to do that, search the apartment without a warrant or any proof or anything, why don't they do other things to catch this guy in a trap or something? So really the film kind of makes it to where they don't cross that line, the detectives. And I'm going to show a scene where Lisa actually is the one that goes up and searches, and that creates a whole tension, scary scene that's added to the film. But this one is where they pretty well find out, okay, there's an explanation for everything, so they were probably wrong. What they suspected pretty well checked out as far as everything had a reason. So they're kind of disappointed, but they begin to explore, and this is what I'm talking about, the dialogue. They begin to explore, like, well, should we be watching and suspecting people of things when it's kind of a private world? In fact, the detective says, hey, that's a private world out there. And so he leaves, and this is the moment after he leaves. So I'm going to show that. They just saw something that they probably shouldn't have seen as far as it's sad.
To give Thomas J. Doyle too much credit, he might have gotten a hold of something when he said that was pretty private stuff going on out there. I wonder if it's ethical to watch a man with binoculars and a long focus lens. Do you suppose it's ethical even if you prove that he didn't commit a crime?
I'm not much on Rear Window ethics.
Of course, they can do the same thing to me. Watch me like a bug under a glass if they want to.
Jeff, if someone came in here, they wouldn't believe what they'd see.
What?
You and me with long faces, plunged into despair because we find out a man didn't kill his wife. We're two of the most frightening ghouls I've ever known. You'd think we could be a little bit happy that the poor woman...
So they're wrestling with that. What did they see? Now, this scene was what I was talking about. They were just going to go check the garden for something that they suspected. And she decides on her own, well, I'm going to go up and check his place. And this shows where, Jimmy Stewart, he had to act, with just his kind of emotions and whispering and the tension there you can see. She just decides to sneak up there.
Lisa, what are you doing?
He's trying. You can see it in his eyes. He's trying to think, "What do I do? I can't go out there."
Lisa, what are you doing? Don't go.
So he's just, and then she gets caught in there. The guy comes back, and it shows the suspense of that moment, that there's nothing he can do. He can only react. So he's coming back.
Lisa. Lisa.
So, you know, obviously you see where, and Hitchcock, the whole film takes place in Jeff's apartment. There's only a couple scenes that show outside of that apartment, and they're very brief. So it's just mainly in that room that the action takes place and what he can see. So it's a neat film. I hope you get to watch it. They've remade it in several different ways. I know one film was called Disturbia. It came out, I think, about 10, 15 years ago. That was a remake of this. There's been books that I read one here a while back that, you know, it was basically, I'm like, this is Rear Window. And they even mention in the book that she watches old films like that, like Rear Window. I thought, well, they're giving a nod to where they took this material from. And they update it, but still pretty much that same concept. You know, seeing something that maybe you shouldn't have. What do? You know, how involved do you get? And so hopefully you enjoyed the story and get a chance to see the film, and that I showed you some of the differences, and we talked. Like I said, make sure when you're answering these questions, put fully your opinion, and then there's some I will ask more direct that you know, from the videos and from the writing, that to just make sure you are taking part in that. So anyway, any questions, make sure to email me, and we'll be moving on. You'll be taking a quiz over this as far as just some more expounding on the thoughts of the differences. And in fact, I'll give you a preview. You know, you're gonna have to know what some similarities are and what some differences are, just based off this talk, what I told you. You don't have to, you can research a little bit if you want to on the film, but most of them can be answered through this video. So if you need to go back and watch this video, you can, and find the differences and similarities, and then there'll be some other questions in that. So good job, guys, and we'll be starting our next story after that, okay?